hearing ito para hindi bigyan ng hustisya ang mga journalista pinapatay. Ngayon po, anak ni Dr. Gerry Ortega na si Mika Ortega ang magbibigay ng kanyang mensahe para sa kanyang amang na mayapa.
To the organizers of this rally, the College Editors Guild of the Philippines, to the members of my family, to many of our friends, friends from the media, friends from various organizations, all vigilant citizens of this country, a pleasant morning to all. We are gathered here today to send the Court of Appeals a reminder and a request. A reminder for the CA to reflect on the past, to recall how our nation was 40 years ago, when impunity was at its height, and thus to remember why it must never be allowed to reign again. And the request for the CA to deny the petitions of the Reyes brothers, and therefore to allow the case of Dr. Gerry Ortega, my father, to be heard fairly and honestly in the court of law. We beseech the appellate court to heed our reminder and our request to rule in favor of justice and to rule against impunity. 26 years ago, during the EDSA Revolution, when finally the Filipino people gathered enough courage to unite in order to oust a dictator, a plunderer, a murderer, it was then that my father stood in front of a tank, touching it with both his hands, thinking right then and there that that was how he was going to die. At that moment in his life, he had made peace with death, and able to fathom any better way to die than for one's own country. But death didn't come to collect that day. It will be more than 2 decades later when death would come knocking at my father's door again, holding on to the same reason he gave death when he was much younger. Indeed, there is nothing more honorable than to die selflessly. Nothing more worthy of emulation than the understanding that fighting for freedom, freedom from corruption and oppression, is more valuable than one's own life. However, one must ask, what value is there in this ultimate sacrifice if its only contribution to society is the promise of more deaths, of more murders? How many Filipinos have died since our liberation from tyranny? How many more brave souls will have to die before we come to grasp the significance of our ancestors' martyrdom? At the wake of each fallen hero, we always speak of honor and emulation and courage and legacy. But what we fail to see is that as more people die after them, as we lose track of their names, the more we diminish the meaning of their sacrifice. This is not what they died for. A mere 11 days from today marks the 40th anniversary of the declaration of martial law. And it seems that every succeeding year since then, we found ourselves still falling for justice, for yet another fallen hero, just as we find ourselves doing at this very hour. Is this the freedom that our fellow men died fighting for during the Marcos era? Perhaps the only tangible difference is that my father was not murdered under a despotic rule. Ironically enough, he was killed during a time of supposed peace, during a time of democracy. Have we forgotten what once was? Have we allowed our fear to keep us from looking back at our bitter past? Have we been condemned into repeating our own history? Impunity does not need an authoritarian rule in order to reign. All it requires is for people of government to turn a blind eye. All it takes now is for the CA to overlook the outright insolence of the Reyes brothers, who evaded arrest and consistently showed disregard for our laws and our courts. If the brothers are granted relief that they aspire for, what then separates our leaders and our courts from those who allowed for mass murder during the martial law? If even those faced with overwhelming evidence of perpetrating murder are set free without so much as a trial, are we not encouraging more murders? And in effect, are we not party to these murders? So now we urge the CA to hold its ground against injustice and impunity. to see to it that the Reyes brothers face the allegations against them in the court of law, to stand firm against any maneuvering done by the brothers and their allies. When my father faced the tank, he has been prepared to die. Not because his death would mean victory. To the contrary, it might have even meant defeat on that day. But like the millions who took to the streets 26 years ago, he was there because he had to be. Because once in a while, the universe allows us a moment of lucidity when we realize that there simply are battles worth fighting for. We stand here today reminding ourselves that while the culture of impunity has long since been part of our history, we also know that we never lacked heroes willing to brave the fire. And that despite our disturbing capacity to forget and to ignore, we will always have emissaries to remind us of our forgotten humanity. Today is also a request for us to never allow ourselves to be deterred by the alarming statistics, lest we allow our fallen heroes to have died for nothing. So while the fight for justice has been long and hard, while we have had some small victories along the way, we still have a very steep climb ahead of us. But despite the pull of gravity, we continue to climb, hoping against hope that we will reach the summit eventually, if we continue to push with unassailable determination. We can only pray for the CA to join us in our quest for justice, in our fight against impunity. Thank you all for being here today, for lending us your time, and for lending us your voice.